Hello, neurodivergent nation. This is Dr. Service, and today I thought we should discuss what I've been noticing about how autism is presented and viewed by the world, what I see the real problem is, and what it looks like to be a healthy autistic person. Nearly everything out there about autism comes from a pathological viewpoint, which means that the world has been solely focusing on what they think is wrong with autistic people. Do you ever hear anyone in the scientific community talking about what's right with autistic people and focusing on what's wrong with the world autistic people live in? When people are late diagnosed with autism, I often hear the same story about how others don't know what to think of them, and they've spent their whole lives feeling like nobody understands them. They're basically feeling like they're a giant walking question mark. Society is genuinely puzzled by autistic individuals. The ideas that society has about autism are largely misguided. They're short-sighted, ignorant, contradictory, and for the most part, unhelpful. You see, autism is not what most of the internet and the world says about it. Autism, it's not just a set of problems and deficiencies. Usually what others think of autism is actually something else, like anxiety or mania or depression or other sort of disorders. And when mixed with autism, people often assume it's just autism, or they don't see the autism at all and they're just misdiagnosed with some other disorder like trauma or personality disorders. So if society is not going to ask the right questions and science focuses almost completely on the question of what's wrong with autistic people, let's you and I ask better questions. What does autism look like in a person when they've not been completely traumatized by a society that doesn't support it? What's an autistic person like who's doing really well? These are all good questions, so let's answer them now. Number one, for some autistic individuals, autism is being able to recognize the smaller details that neurotypical people don't, because neurotypical people are often so concerned with the social rules of behavior. You see, autistic people tend to have different operating patterns in their frontal lobe and occipital lobes, which allow them to see patterns and details, sometimes better than others. Number two, along that same vein, many autistic people are very good at recognizing patterns in various settings. They try to make sense of deeper systems within a variety of things, including social settings. They can often see unnoticeable patterns in human behavior, in comedy, in ant colonies, and architecture. And many see systemic structures and levels of beauty in their environment that neurotypical people often don't. And they can find delight in observing others, especially when they learn to mimic someone and it results in a successful connection with somebody else. Many are very rule-driven. That's our third one, which means there's consistency. They might think, if this happens and that's the result, then this is what I can expect going forward. This means you can usually count on an autistic person to follow that pattern themselves if they see it being beneficial. Now, some autistic people may appear to be inconsistent, but if you look deeper into their thought process, usually you'll see a great deal of rule-driven behavior and consistency. So when the world out there sees an erratic autistic person, a woman who maybe appears to be contradicting herself all over the place, chances are she's reacting to the internal rules that she's developed that are not working well in that situation. So notice I said that they like rules and consistency, not that their rules always work well in every situation. Number four, many autistic people say that they see no use in judging others by their home or their job or how a person looks. They often look beyond social expectations and just know if they like you or not, and if you make them feel good. That's pretty much it. Number five, most autistic people say what they mean and mean what they say. Even during a meltdown, you can be fairly confident what they're saying is exactly how they feel at that moment. It may change after they feel different, but you usually don't have to guess as to whether or not an autistic person is trying to trick you or lie to you. There's usually no underlying sneaky motives or hurtful agenda that they're getting at. Number six, they can become intently focused on certain things, which may develop into a strength. Their conceptual understanding and attention to details is something that they're very interested in. That can be a very valuable asset to others and to the world. Number seven, they can be fantastic employees, giving their all to their job while they're there, trying to avoid drama and largely contributing in ways neurotypical people cannot. Number eight, they think about problems differently, which promotes different solutions that may solve problems better than traditional approaches. Number 9, When you ask a question to an autistic person, if they have an answer for you, you'll likely get the raw, unfiltered answer. If you don't want to know the truth, don't ask an autistic person. It won't make sense to them to try to sugarcoat anything. They'll usually just give it to you the way it's in their mind. So, no games, and I think that's pretty great also. Number 10, an autistic person can be your best friend and they can be very loyal. They're naturally very trusting until they're betrayed too many times. But they expect an open, honest relationship that's not built on expectations that don't align with what they want. Additionally, they're more likely to have fewer good friends and may not readily engage in traditional, typical, and expected friendship behaviors. You may not get a call as often, and they may not feel the need to attend events that they're not interested in, but there is a strong connection there. Number 11, contrary to what the world believes, an autistic person is highly empathic, and they can sometimes feel things with such intensity that they actually need a break from it. They can usually have a very strong idea of right and wrong, and what makes sense and what does not, and things like injustice and unfairness really don't do well in their mind. When they resonate with a certain cause, they may go all in, and they may even go so far as to create an organization to work towards solutions because basically nobody else is. Number 12, many autistic people will see things very logically, often seeing things as right or wrong, black or white, yes or no. When others see gray area, many autistic people don't, possibly because they understand the subject differently, or they may have more knowledge on it than you do, or it simply doesn't make logical sense to them. They tend to be less susceptible to something neurotypical people suffer from called the framing effect, which has to do with making decisions based purely on emotion. So when neurotypical people make decisions based on emotion, it often leads to problems. Many times, individuals who are autistic are less likely to be affected by that. Number 13, they're usually very willing to share information and resources related to their areas of interest and passion that they want you to also experience, and that's an amazing thing. And that's very kind and caring of them to do that. So listen to them and you may learn something because in my experience, there's a good reason for their level of interest, passion, and expertise.
Many autistic people are capable of superhuman things. The reason for this is because they've already been through so many very difficult things and difficult emotions, difficult situations and circumstances, things they never asked for, things they never signed up for. A lot of them, it requires so much strength and effort just to get out of bed in the morning and show up to work or show up to wherever they have to show up to that a lot of neurotypical people have never experienced that and they might not understand. Imagine if you wore a backpack all the time and throughout the day people would just come along and give you weight, put in your backpack. Sometimes you put it in yourself, sometimes they do it for you. But all throughout the day, these little pieces of weight, these little bits, these expectations, these punishments, all these things that you never agreed to, they tend to add up over time. Now imagine carrying that around all day, every day. Eventually, you become extremely strong in those areas. Okay, now that we've identified that autistic people aren't just a set of problems to be misunderstood, and I've listed just a few of the millions of pretty amazing things about autism and about autistic people, let's take a careful look at the world that we have no choice but to live in.
We all live in a society right now that's confusing and stressful. It's contradictory, it's shameless, it's full of unnecessary sounds and lights, it's ripe with trickery, and it's hypocritical. It's overwhelmingly and artificially smelly, and it's dangerous on many levels.
In this neurotypical world we live in, women are constantly being told what acceptable beauty standards look like. The standards are impossible, but hey, luckily the same companies that tell us what the standards are, they'll also sell you some expensive solutions, so.
Studies suggest the average person lies to others several times each day, usually in small, confusing white lies. These daily acts of accepted social dishonesty is part of this neurotypical world. When you go out to buy a car, it's also understood that the seller bumps up the price and the buyer talks the price down. Now, why is that? Why don't they just ask for what they want and be done with it? This is the neurotypical world we live in.
In some cultures, it's rude and aggressive to look other people in the eye. In the United States, however, it's considered culturally appropriate and expected, especially in the business world. Studies suggest that the reason we do this is to either form a more intimate connection or to see if the person is being dishonest, see what their ulterior motives are. Either way, this is the neurotypical world we live in.
You ever walked into a big box home improvement store? Walk down the lighting section and you'll go blind. Listen for a moment and you'll hear ear-piercing, annoying beeps, alarms everywhere, clanging pipes. The overhead system is like speaking some sort of unintelligible announcement. An unhelpful associate with bad breath wants to come and ask you questions about your topic or about your project that they don't know anything about, and they only offer you the wrong information in return. The products themselves may be hard to find the price of, if they're on the right shelf at all, and when you actually do need help with something, the associates all seem to have vanished. And this is the neurotypical world we all shop in. By the way, no disrespect to our retail workers. We all love you. So let's not even get started on government contradictions and hypocrisy. We all know it's all there. It never gets resolved. And that's the sick, disordered world we all have no choice but to live in. So just a real quick recap before we go on. We now know what autism is and what it looks like when not traumatized by a neurotypical society. We know how the society we live in is actually very, very sick. It's disordered, it is diseased, it is dysfunctional, and it's only getting worse, and it doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. Current pathological-based ideas about autism that have come from the scientific community are based solely on the difficulties an autistic person has in trying to assimilate or live in this world that is contradictory and shame-based and disordered and intentionally confusing and dishonest. That's the world that we live in. It's like trying to put whipped cream on a turd and wondering why it still smells like crap. Underneath, it's still a turd, and this turd of a society is kind of a turd. So consider autism from this new, fresh vantage point where society is actually what is disordered, and natural autistic traits may very well be the part of the solution that we're looking for. Consider the idea that many of the people throughout history who've moved society forward in a positive way were or are highly suspected of being autistic. So, if the positive traits of autism are not really problematic, but simply clash with this disordered turd of a world we live in, then we have to ask why neurotypical people aren't bothered by it more than they are. And if they do control it, because they greatly outnumber the neurodivergent, why aren't they doing what makes sense and changing it? I mean, in this context, why isn't there a disorder based on the obvious and glaring problems with being neurotypical? Maybe it would be something called neurotypical social cognitive disorder, or NSCD for short. So, just for kicks, if there were a disorder for being neurotypical, diagnostic criteria might look something like A person with NSCD has less than intense passion for any subject or special interest and is unable to focus for longer than 12 hours on any subject aside from electronics use. They also quickly switch from thoughts and ideas and topics and tasks, and basically this is rendering them unable to be expert in any area in a short period of time. B, they've got a lack of awareness of potential problems that could occur in crowded public places, in large groups of people, and in situations where the intent and personalities of others is unknown. C, the person becomes distressed when alone. They need noises to not feel uncomfortable in silence, and they can't entertain themselves well all alone. They seek out validation in the presence of others in most matters through eye contact or pointless small talk. They're taught that providing untruthful information to others is being polite and constantly seek praise from others through social media. All right. Of course, this idea of pathologizing neurotypical people is just a joke, but seriously, they say autistic people have challenges with shifting between ideas, thoughts, and tasks. I say neurotypical people have a hard time concentrating on their passion long enough to actually be great at it and bring them joy. They say autistic people become distressed when exposed to too many stimuli at once. I say neurotypicals have created unnecessary chaos and chronic overstimulation everywhere so that they can create and sell treatments like anti-anxiety medications, ADHD medications, spa treatments, vacation packages, all aimed at lowering our natural response to the artificial, unnecessary chaos. They say autistics don't do well with complex social situations. I say neurotypicals have difficulty being authentic and they struggle with honesty in their social approach. I could go on and on with these examples forever. The fact is, neurodivergent people must identify themselves, and they've got to come together to change some of these things in this world. As of 2021, the CDC suggests that 1 in 54 children are identified as being autistic. And they insist that it's 4 times more common for boys to be identified than girls. Now think back to the year 2000. The numbers were very different. They were 1 in 150 children identified as being autistic. Now, it's very important that we not confuse the rate of identification of autism with the actual occurrence of autism. I believe that the mental health and scientific community are highly inadequate at recognizing autism, and being diagnosed with autism is largely limited to those who are able to be seen by professionals, those who have financial means to do so, meaning they've got the money to spend on assessments and private insurance. I believe the rate of autistic individuals being born throughout the world is far greater than reported, and it always has been. And I believe there are equal numbers of autistic people between genders. I know a lot of people disagree with me when I say autism itself is not the problem. The real disadvantage, in my opinion, is that those without autism greatly outnumber those with an ASD diagnosis, and the neurotypical people are the ones who have created the rules that this disordered society is in, which autistic people are forced to live and have no real say in. Autistic people never agreed to things like compound interest being the only way to get a home loan, or to being financially punished by the IRS and banking industry for being self-employed, which many autistic people are. Autistic people were never consulted about the idea that some stimming behaviors are okay, while other forms of stimming are seen as bothersome to others and need to stop. They aren't the ones who decided effective communication includes not saying what you mean so you sound nicer. Neurotypical people get to be in charge of their own bodies and space, whereas autistic individuals, especially those who've been through ABA therapy, they don't have a choice. They're told when to hug people, when to shake hands, make eye contact, that they need to allow people into their space. And when an autistic child or adult melts down, they get even less control over their bodies, sometimes being forced into harmful holds or into hospitals. And they're not given what they need until they comply. Now, after all that I've said, in reality, there's no shame being neurotypical or neurodivergent, because everybody's neurological functioning should be respected and honored as a form of diversity. So let's not feel bad for neurotypical people, and let's not be ableist toward them. They're doing the best they can, and they can do really great things too. Of course, I'm just joking. Neurodivergent people are essential to our humanity, and really there's no right or normal way of thinking, just as there's no right or normal ethnic culture or gender. It's all about equity of social power, and it's crucial that the world not only accept but support the idea that autistic and ADHD and other neurodivergent people are not sick and disordered, but positively different, and we need that. So, what might an autistic world look like? Well, why don't you tell me? In the comments below, let me know what a world designed by autistic and ADHD people might be like. I do read your comments and respond to many of them. My last point I want to make is I want to talk about what well-functioning, mentally healthy autistic individuals might be like. I mean, it's always been about what an autistic person that's struggling is like, never what it's like to be doing really well. So let's change that right now. To me, an autistic individual doing well in this life is someone who feels respected and dignified. They feel believed, and they're able to operate in this world in a way that's free from triggers or provides tools and accommodations to greatly reduce them. But how could that look in the real world? It means the autistic person wakes up well rested in the morning because they went to bed feeling confident about their next day. And if they have sleep problems, they have the proper, affordable treatment for that. If they eat breakfast, they have a healthy choice of affordable and available foods that their bodies don't reject. As they leave the home, they have ideas as to what to expect going forward, and their families, their friends, and employers all understand that consistency is important to them and give them as much advance notice of unavoidable changes as possible. They know that their personal space is going to be respected at work and with friends and family, and others know when talking to them that they should mean what they say and say what they mean. They're treated with dignity and respect by all people. Their office or their workplace has lights that are dimmable, and they have an opportunity to have a workspace where they can get up and move around, where they can stim, and they can have window shades that lower, and their office is free from triggering sounds and smells. They set their own schedule and take frequent breaks throughout the workday, and they're free to come and go as needed for self-care. After work, they might take time to decompress, or if they become overwhelmed, maybe even have a chance to melt down or shut down for a little bit, retreat for that. And they know that this may be part of their process of honoring their autism. So they take time for that, and people respect that. For dinner, they've got a wide array of foods available that were delivered that are both nutritious and cater to their sensory needs. They may get phone calls from friends or text, and everybody understands that it may be short and there may not be much talking going back and forth, but they still feel good knowing people care enough to call and text or chat. They go outside and they spend some time exercising in the woods and near water where their brain is most at home. They get home and they decide to end their evening by watching their favorite YouTube videos and chatting with friends online, and only feel the need to do that for an hour or two because they're not retreating from anything. They set out their clothes and prepare for the next day. They may see a text from friends to go out and do something as a group later on that week, but the friends ask them far enough in advance that they can plan for it and mentally and emotionally settle into the idea. Then they lay down and they sleep, possibly with their weighted blanket made with sensory-friendly materials, knowing that they had a great day and they're content with doing it all over again tomorrow. They even have the option to work at home when they feel the need and can take ample time off for their interest. So that's just one example of a great day for an autistic person, in my opinion. And it just happened to be a single person example that I just gave. But if you have an example, please share it in the comments below. Email me. Do whatever you need to do to flesh that out in your mind. Because maybe we can all borrow from each other's ideas and all have some great days. I'm Dr. Service, and I hope this helps you in your neurodiverse universe.